Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of October. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. First we're going to discuss the north of Lugansk area or the east of Kharkiv region. We're going to discuss the Liman, let's say Kupiansk front line, this area. As you can see, the Western sources map hasn't been updated. Now the Western source map are showing that the Ukrainians returned control, or at least now towns like Popovka and all these towns like on the east from Kovalyovka and Karamzinovka is in the gray zone. This is a very interesting update because if we take a look at the Russian sources map, we won't find these updates. But this is the Western source understanding of the situation, that Ukrainians developing their offensive operation, and that now the Ukrainians, like let's say in 6 kilometers in front of Svatove, the heart of this area, in 6 kilometers of the main goal of this, let's say Svatove offensive operation. But if we're talking about the Russian sources, they're giving us totally different opposite information. First of all, as you know, during the previous days, the Ukrainians were trying to develop their bridgehead on Liman side of this offensive operation. First, the Ukrainians got control Tarskoe, Yampolovka, Terny. Then they were trying to developing their bridgehead, moving in direction of Plashank, of Krasnorechensk, in direction of Chervonopopovka. So they were trying to develop this area. But a few days ago, something went wrong. During the few weeks in a row, the Ukrainians were trying to move more reinforcement in this area to fulfill this attack group who was moving in this direction. But if you remember, the Russians gave us a lot of reports where they were saying that during the crossing of Zherebets River, and the Russians were talking about this front line, they managed to destroy, let's say, 30 soldiers, 25 soldiers, 2, 3, 5 armored vehicles, and so on. And the Russians were reported about that during almost 2 weeks in a row. And of course, that situation took a very unpleasant effect for the Ukrainians, because today the Russians reported that they managed to start counter-offensive operation, and if we will talk the result of this counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians, according to the Russian sources, the Ukraine lost this entire bridgehead. They were pushed back, and now, according to the Russian sources, there are clashes in the town by the name of Terny, in Yampolovka, and Tarskoe. So this is the only 3 towns that are still under Ukrainian control. The towns like Nevskaya, Makeevka, all these small towns, all these small forests and fields now are under Russian control. They did a very effective counteroffensive operation and they pushed Ukrainians back on this line. But okay, we can say that yes, the Russians managed to achieve very nice success, but we need to see the progress in a few weeks, because this might be some kind of like a carousel. Now, this day the Russians attack, and tomorrow the Ukrainians will be, and they will run one for another during the next days. But for today, the Russians managed to return control, and now the main question: are they able to hold this position for more than like 1 day? Let's say a week, or let's say the best solution, the best way to hold this area forever and to completely develop their offensive operation on this side of Zherebets River. So by this evening, the clashes are in Terny, Yampolovka, Tarskoe. All this area is under Russian control as a result of effective counter-offensive operation. The Russians reported that during the previous 24 hours, as a result of rocket attack, artillery attack, the Ukraine lost around 70 soldiers and something around 14 armored vehicles. Now let's move a little bit to the north. The Ukrainians were trying to do the same thing as they did before. They were trying to storm Kuzyemovka and Novoselska in this area. The Russians reported that Ukrainians were using around 500 soldiers, so we can say something around 1 BTG, and they were using a very short front line, trying to attack Kuzyemovka. But the Russians reported that they managed to stop the Ukrainians with artillery attack, with rocket attack, and so on. The Ukrainians were defeated. They did, according to the Russian report, around 5 attacks in a row. And as a result of those clashes, the Ukrainians lost around 160 soldiers and something around 24 armored vehicles in this area. Why is that? Why is that happening? I believe that if we're talking about the global scope, today we got a very interesting report from the Russian sources that Ukrainians are moving a lot of reinforcement in direction of Orekhov Gulyai-Polye. This is the possible area where the Ukrainians might try to make another attempt of counter-offensive operation. And the Russians reported that they've seen big convoys and on the railroads of armored vehicles, and the Russian sources are saying that mainly the Ukrainians are moving forces from Kharkiv area, from this region. So maybe this is the reason why the Russians, they calculated, they spotted, they understood the situation in this area. They saw that Ukrainians moved the reinforcement from this area in direction of Orechov, of Zaporozhye. So that's why they decided to try the luck, and as you can see, they were pretty successful. And they managed to destroy, at least by this evening, the entire bridgehead on Liman area that located in front of Kremenная, Zhutlivka, Chernovopopivka in this area. Also, we saw that the Ukrainians are not able to achieve any success in attacking in direction of Svatove. Of course, there is very interesting update according to Western sources map, but for now I don't have any improvements or any reports about any progress from the Ukrainian side in this area. For now, maybe it's some kind of speculation. So we'll see, but I believe that sooner or later we will see the real situation in this area. Now let's move to the south, and if we're talking about the area between Belogorovka, Sporne and Bakhmut in this area, the Ukrainians were trying to develop some offensive operation from Belogorovka. Because we discussed in previous videos, of course, they need to attack in direction Shapivilovka, Novodruzhsk, Privolye. If they are able to establish a bridgehead in this area, this might bring them a lot of success, because by controlling this area, first of all, they will be able to get up on the highland, because this area is on the hill and this area is on the lowland. And from this area, from Privolye, we remember we saw the map of the ground on Google Earth. We know that Privolye, Novodruzhsk is very is in a high position, and these towns around this area is like on your hands. So that's why from this area it's very there is a very high chance to control entire area around this area. So that's why the Ukrainians were trying to move in this direction. But the Russians reported that all the Ukrainian attacks were failed. And the Russians started some local counteroffensive operation, and the Ukrainians, according to the Russian sources, are demoralized, and I believe it's highly unlikely that they will continue developing anything in this action, in this area. If we're talking about Bakhmut, there were no updates from Bakhmut. So the Russians are storming this area very slowly, building by building, maybe even not even building by building, but even floor by floor. So very slow, without any big progress in this area. But now let's talk about Donetsk. If we're talking about Donetsk, today we got very interesting update. To tell the truth, I don't understand the Ukrainians, because maybe they have some plan, maybe they're tired, I don't know. But today we got report from the Russian sources that the Russians, finally, the Russians managed to penetrate the Ukrainian defense orders in this area, and they managed to enter Vodyane, this town. As you can see, this map has been updated. The Russian source map now showing that there is a gray line that moves like at least in the south part of Vodyane, but we got at least some confirmations from different military experts who is located in this area that the Russians not just entered the south part of Vodyane, also they managed to establish the control over the north part of Vodyane. Furthermore, the Russians achieved some success in the east side, and they're moving in direction of Opytne. So let's take a look at the Western sources map. Of course, this map is not updated. I believe that we won't see any progress in this area. So this is the situation, and according to the last Russian report that we received today, the Russians established control over this area. So there something that now the front line looks like this. Furthermore, the Russians are moving from this area in direction of Opytne, and some sources are saying that maybe the Russians even managed to enter, let's say, some east part of this town. If we're talking about Opytne, this situation doesn't matter. Of course, it's very important to move the Ukrainians from this area, and believe me, the Russians will do this. They will push the Ukrainians from this area. The most important thing is that the Russians managed to penetrate the defense line and orders in Vodyane and to split this area in two parts. And this is not just like a very nice situation for the Russians. This is the worst scenario for the Ukrainians. This is the worst nightmare for the Ukrainians in this area, because from now on, the Russians are able to develop their offensive operation in Vodyane in direction to the west, trying to establish final control over Pervomaiska from the south, let's say from Peski, and from Vodiana to the west, clearing the Vodiana entirely, and of course to attack Oputna to the east, also from both sides. And the most important part now, that the Russians now are able to develop their offensive operation in direction of Severna. Of course, this is not an easy job, it will take months, but I believe that by the end of this year, the Russians are able to take control over this Severna small village, small town, Severna. And if the Russians are able to do this by the end of this year, it will be a very difficult operation because there are trenches all along these green lines, small forest, and the Ukrainians have trenches all along in direction to Severna. And the Russians have just one tactic how to do this, just to ruin the trenches till just destroy and reduce these trenches to ruins, and then they will be able to take these trenches one by one. And if the Russians are able to take Severna by the end of this year, we see that from now on, Avdiivka will appear in operational encirclement. And the Ukrainians will have to decide, or to stand there till the last Ukrainian, or to start evacuation. And this is the best Ukrainian position in this area, because this is exactly the area that Ukrainians are, one of the areas that Ukrainians are using to attack Donetsk with artillery, with HIMARS, and so on. But from now on, from this perspective, the Russians will be able to establish fire control over this area, and then we might see maybe not the storming operation, because I believe that the Russians or DPR soldiers who located here, they love these guys so much, so I believe that they will try to encircle this area and not to allow the Ukrainians to evacuate or to escape from this area. I believe they will try to do everything they can but to pin down the Ukrainians in this area, and believe me, there are a lot of Ukrainians there, and they will try to encircle them. So first of all, they will pin down, trying to not to allow the Ukrainians to do any movements in this area, and then they will be able to move to Toninka, Orlovka, and by taking Orlovka, if the Russians are able to take Orlovka, we can say that Avdiivka appeared in small cauldron, and this is going to be a very interesting battle. And maybe the story, the bad story, the suffering of Donetsk finally will be ended. I hope that this war will be ended by this evening, but anyway. Furthermore, as we can see, the Ukrainian front line in Avdiivka finally started collapsing. That was a very long story. That was sometimes I believe that a lot of us were thinking that the Russians are not able to do anything. But today, Vodiana has fallen, at least the middle part, and now the Russians do have possibilities to penetrate, to continue penetration in this area, and finally to complete this story. Of course, as you can see, there is an icon. Today we also saw that the Russians started storming of Nivolskaya. And by taking these two towns, like Vodiana and Nivolskaya, also the Russians are opening the small window or door to attack Krasnogorovka from the north. So this is the focal point, this is the main goal for the Russians, for civilians from DPR, finally to solve the issue around the town and to move the Ukrainians as far as possible from this area. And I believe this is the most successful front line from the Russian side. This one, and of course Bakhmut. And today we got report from Liman area, but we need more confirmation because for now it's like fog of war there and we can't believe for 100% the Russian information. You're talking about Zaporozhye, as I told you, we got very important update that the Ukrainians are doing regrouping and they're moving a lot of forces in this area. So we'll see what they're planning. But anyway, they have at least not more than 2 weeks to do something, because then I believe it will be highly unlikely that they will do something. And winter time, if we are going to see any offensive operation during the winter period, I believe that it's going to be Russian offensive operation, but not the Ukrainian. And we're talking about Kherson district. As you can see, the same picture. The Ukrainians were trying to establish the stable road between Andreevka, Belogorovka, bridgehead, and this bridgehead that Ukrainians established control over during the previous counter-offensive operation. But they were defeated near Davidov Brod. They were defeated at the same areas like Sadok, Borozenska, Petykhatka, Sukhanova, the same area. And the Russians reported that as a result of those attacks, Ukraine lost around 125 soldiers and something around 20 armored vehicles. So we can say that the Ukrainians, if they don't have anything to show, maybe they don't have, who knows, maybe they have, but for now, the Russians, that everything was collapsed during the previous 2 weeks from the Russian side, they lost a lot of, and now we see the same picture as we saw before. The Russians very slowly, step by step, meter by meter, are reducing the Ukrainian army, are taking new trenches and moving forward. So let's see what we are going to see in the next months, or in the months, or in January. I believe that the picture in January will be changed. I don't know why, but something tells me that the front line will be changed by the January. And it will be changed very nicely. We're going to see a lot of changes by January. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you can condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.